The legal concept of exigent circumstances plays a crucial role in criminal law, granting law enforcement officers certain powers and exceptions when faced with urgent situations. These circumstances often involve imminent danger or the risk of evidence destruction, providing justification for officers to bypass the typical requirements of obtaining a warrant before conducting a search or making an arrest. Understanding the nuances and applications of exigent circumstances is essential for both legal professionals and the general public in New Jersey. Understanding exigent circumstances refer to emergency situations that allow law enforcement officers to bypass the usual requirement of obtaining a search warrant before conducting a search or seizure. These situations typically arise when there is an imminent threat to public safety, a risk of evidence being destroyed, or a suspect's potential escape. In these cases, the officers must act swiftly to prevent harm or the loss of evidence, which justifies the warrantless search or seizure. Legal basis for exigent circumstances. The legal basis for exigent circumstances comes from the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, which protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. The amendment states that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects, against unreasonable searches and seizures, shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. The role of the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment plays a crucial role in maintaining the balance between public safety and individual rights. In this subsection, we will discuss the importance of the Fourth Amendment in the context of exigent circumstances and how it shapes the legal landscape surrounding this exception. The Fourth Amendment aims to protect citizens from unreasonable government intrusion into their private lives, establishes the requirement for a warrant based on probable cause before a search or seizure can be conducted. The courts have recognized exceptions to the warrant requirement, including exigent circumstances, which allow for warrantless searches and seizures in emergency situations. Exigent circumstances must meet specific criteria to be considered valid and not in violation of the Fourth Amendment. The balance between public safety and individual rights is at the core of the exigent circumstances exception. Emergency situations. For exigent circumstances. Exigent circumstances encompass a wide range of emergency situations that may justify warrantless searches and seizures. To better understand the scope and limitations of this exception, it is important to examine the various types of exigent circumstances recognized by the courts. Imminent danger to life. One of the most common types of exigent circumstances involves situations where there is an imminent danger to someone's life or safety. In these instances, law enforcement officers may be required to act quickly to prevent harm or even death. For example, if officers hear cries for help or sounds of a struggle coming from inside a residence, they may enter the premises without a warrant to ensure the safety of the occupants. Similarly, if officers believe that a hostage situation is unfolding, they may intervene without obtaining a warrant, as any delay could put the hostages' lives at risk. Risk of evidence destruction. Another type of exigent circumstance arises when there is a risk that crucial evidence will be destroyed if law enforcement officers do not act immediately. In these situations, waiting to obtain a warrant could result in the loss of valuable evidence, hindering the investigation and potentially allowing a suspect to evade justice. For instance, if officers have reason to believe that a suspect is in possession of illegal drugs and is attempting to dispose of them, they may enter the suspect's residence without a warrant to prevent the destruction of the evidence. Hot pursuit. The concept of hot pursuit is another recognized form of exigent circumstances. This term refers to situations where law enforcement officers are actively pursuing a suspect who is attempting to evade arrest. In these cases, officers may enter private property without a warrant in order to apprehend the suspect. The underlying rationale for this exception is that the immediate need to arrest a fleeing suspect outweighs the individual's privacy rights. It is important to note that for the hot pursuit exception to apply, the pursuit must be continuous and uninterrupted, and there must be a close temporal and spatial connection between the suspect's flight and the officer's entry onto private property. Preventing a suspect's escape. Exigent circumstances may also exist when law enforcement officers need to act quickly to prevent a suspect's escape. Similar to the hot pursuit exception, this type of exigent circumstance arises when there is an immediate need to apprehend a suspect who poses a threat to public safety or who may otherwise evade capture. For example, if officers have surrounded a building where they believe a dangerous suspect is hiding, and they have reason to believe the suspect is planning to escape, they may enter the building without a warrant to prevent the suspect's flight. How courts evaluate exigent circumstances. The evaluation of exigent circumstances by courts involves a careful examination of the specific facts and circumstances surrounding each case. Judges must determine whether the warrantless search or seizure was justified under the particular circumstances presented. This section will explore the various factors and tests courts use to assess the validity of exigent circumstances, including the objective reasonableness test, the probable cause requirement, and time constraints associated with warrantless searches. Objective reasonableness test. One of the primary tests used by courts to evaluate exigent circumstances is the objective reasonableness test. This test requires courts to determine whether a reasonable law enforcement officer, placed in the same situation and possessing the same knowledge as the officer in question, would have believed that exigent circumstances existed. The objective reasonableness test ensures that warrantless searches and seizures are only permitted in situations where an officer's actions are deemed reasonable under the circumstances. Some factors that courts may consider when applying the objective reasonableness test include the nature and severity of the crime being investigated, the immediacy and gravity of the threat to public safety or the risk of evidence destruction, the degree of intrusion into the individual's privacy, the availability of alternative methods to secure the premises or preserve evidence, probable cause requirement. In addition to determining the reasonableness of an officer's actions, courts must also assess whether the officer had probable cause to believe that evidence of a crime would be found in the location searched or that the suspect would be found at the place of seizure. Probable cause is a fundamental requirement for any search or seizure, including those conducted under the exigent circumstances exception. Probable cause exists when there is a fair probability, based on the totality of the circumstances, that evidence of a crime will be found in a particular location or that a person has committed a crime. Time constraints and warrantless searches. When evaluating exigent circumstances, courts must also consider the time constraints faced by law enforcement officers and the potential consequences of waiting to obtain a warrant. In some cases, the urgency of the situation may be so great that there is insufficient time to secure a warrant without jeopardizing public safety or the integrity of the investigation. Limitations and safeguards on exigent circumstances. While the exigent circumstances exception to the Fourth Amendment allows law enforcement officers to conduct warrantless searches and seizures in certain emergency situations, this exception is not without limits and safeguards. This section will discuss the various constraints on the application of exigent circumstances and the legal protections in place to ensure that individual rights are not unnecessarily infringed upon. Exigent circumstances must be genuine. One of the key limitations on the application of exigent circumstances is that the emergency situation must be genuine and not merely a pretext for conducting a warrantless search or seizure. Courts will scrutinize the facts and circumstances of each case to determine whether the office's actions were truly justified by an imminent threat to public safety, a risk of evidence destruction, or a suspect's potential escape. If the court finds that the exigent circumstances were not genuine or were manufactured by the officers themselves, the warrantless search or seizure may be deemed unconstitutional. The scope of warrantless searches must be limited. Another important limitation on exigent circumstances is that the scope of the warrantless search or seizure must be narrowly tailored to address the specific emergency at hand. This means that law enforcement officers cannot use exigent circumstances as a blanket justification to conduct a broad or invasive search of an individual's property. Instead, the search or seizure must be limited to the specific areas or items that are reasonably related to the exigent circumstances at issue. Legal safeguards and remedies. Several legal safeguards and remedies exist to protect individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures conducted under the exigent circumstances exception. These protections include the exclusionary rule, civil lawsuits, internal police department review. How a skilled New Jersey criminal defense lawyer can help. The application of exigent circumstances holds significant implications within the legal framework of New Jersey. While these exceptional circumstances provide law enforcement with the authority to bypass the requirement of obtaining a warrant, they also have the potential to infringe upon individual rights and freedoms. In such complex situations, the guidance and skills of a skilled New Jersey criminal defense lawyer are crucial. With their in-depth knowledge of state laws and legal precedents, an experienced attorney can thoroughly assess the circumstances surrounding a case and determine the lawfulness and validity of the invocation of exigent circumstances. They can carefully scrutinize the actions taken by law enforcement, ensuring that the exigencies genuinely existed and that the response was reasonable and justified. At Lustberg Law Offices LLC, New Jersey criminal defense attorney Adam Lustberg can challenge the admissibility of evidence obtained under exigent circumstances, particularly if the prosecution's case heavily relies on such evidence. Through meticulous examination of the search or arrest procedures, our team can skillfully present a compelling argument to protect your rights. Call us today at 201-880-5311 to schedule a consultation.